The alien king had always been cruel, proud, and unyielding, and his throne room gleamed with the cold brilliance of his arrogance, as if the stars themselves feared him. Yet the greatest test of his pride had nothing to do with conquest or power, but with a tiny, terrified creature chained in the center of the hall, a dragon cub whose scales shimmered like broken glass and whose wings bore the scars of abuse and abandonment. The cub had been left alone to die, in the hopes that fear would break it, and yet, despite its trembling and pain, it had not screamed defeat. And the king roared, laughing at the whispers of the court, and the pleading of his own daughter, who had begged him not to treat the creature so cruelly. He had smiled coldly and wagered her honor, claiming that no one could calm the dragon cub, that it would remain wild and untamed until someone strong enough, clever enough, or foolish enough would attempt the impossible and fail. The court murmured at the audacity of the bet, at the arrogance of the king, and the daughter, whose eyes glimmered with shame and fear, could only watch helplessly as her father's pride became a cruel game that threatened to shatter everything she loved. Yet far below the glittering towers of the citadel, in a labyrinth of workshops, were discarded machines and rusting engines lay abandoned. A human moved quietly, unnoticed by guards, unnoticed by destiny, unnoticed by fate himself. He was weak, broken, and often ridiculed by humans and aliens alike. He had been humiliated and overlooked all his life, yet he carried something none of them had: hope and determination, shaped by a lifetime of life, solitude, and survival. His hands were scarred from repairs and work that others deemed insignificant, but his heart had learned compassion and patience. In a world that had taught him rejection, he had no weapons, no armies, and no claim to greatness. Yet the moment he stepped into the throne room, a spark ignited. The impossible seemed to tremble with possibility. The cub's eyes flickered, with recognition or perhaps with desperation, as he knelt, slowly speaking softly words of comfort and calm. His touch was gentle, patient, unassuming, and for the first time the cub hesitated in its rage and fear. It flinched, but did not strike. It watched him, wary yet curious. The king, from his balcony above, sneered in disbelief, mocking the human, calling him weak, useless, and powerless. Yet the human did not reply with pride or defiance. He replied with presence and patience, and slowly, ever so slowly, the dragon cub inched closer, its wings sagging, its body trembling, yet trusting the hands that did not hurt or command the weeks. That followed were a trial of endurance and patience for both the human and the cub. Every day was filled with small victories, whispered words, and moments of connection. The cub's wounds were treated, its scales cleaned, and its broken spirit soothed. And the daughter, who had watched in despair, now watched in awe. She saw something her father never could: the quiet strength of someone who had nothing and yet gave everything. A bond formed that the soldiers and the courtiers could not understand. It was not power that tamed the cub, it was trust. It was understanding. It was the gentle, unassuming heart of a human who had nothing and yet was everything. When the king realized the cub's resistance was melting, he grew enraged. He tried to intimidate, to bribe, to punish, yet the cub remained calm in the presence of the human. It was impossible. The king said no human could have such influence over a creature born wild, feared and cursed. But the impossible was happening, and the human did not notice the king's eyes. He noticed only the dragon. The dragon noticed only him. The nights were long, and the human scarcely slept. He whispered stories of distant stars, of human worlds, of hope and choice into the cub's ears. The cub responded with trust, leaning slightly into his touch, resting its head against his shoulder, and for the first time since its abandonment, the creature slept. Without fear, the daughter dared to approach slowly, offering food and quiet words, yet she left it to the human to continue the healing. He did not boast. He did not demand acknowledgement. He simply existed. A presence so steadfast that it changed everything. The turning point came suddenly. A rival alien faction, seeking to claim the dragon cub for war and profit, attacked the citadel. The palace erupted into chaos. The sky lit with fire and energy. The cub screamed as a bolt of energy struck its side. It fell to the ground. Trembling and bleeding, the daughter rushed forward, but could not reach it. The human leaped, catching the cub against his chest, shielding it from the worst of the attacks, and whispered words filled with both desperation and promise. "I have you. I will not let go." And in that moment, the eyes of the cub, wide with terror, met the eyes of the human, wide with unwavering courage, and something shifted. The cub's fear turned to trust. Its rage turned to loyalty. The human's heart pounded. The palace shook, and the king watched, his pride shattering into disbelief. The human lifted a device, crude in appearance, yet deadly in effect, and turned the tide against the attackers. The palace trembled. Walls cracked, energy crackled, and the invaders retreated. The dragon cub, still trembling against the human, now breathed calmly, its wings slowly unfolding, as if testing its strength. And the king descended from his balcony, rage still flickering in his eyes, disbelief etched in his face. He saw his daughter place a gentle hand on the cub's head, a gesture of peace and acceptance, and he realized that power without compassion was meaningless. The human, once weak, once broken, had achieved what the king could. Not he had earned the trust of a creature feared and abandoned. He had shown patience where cruelty had failed. He had shown courage where power had collapsed. He had proven that even the smallest, weakest hand could hold the mightiest heart. The daughter smiled softly at him, her tears glimmering. Like starlight, she whispered words of gratitude and awe, and the cub nuzzled her in response. The king, humbled and silent, could only watch as the creature he had bet against chose its own path, and in that path lay freedom, trust, and hope. The palace quieted, save for the soft breathing of a dragon resting on the shoulders of a human, and in that silence, a story of courage, compassion, and the unyielding spirit of humanity was written. The cub, once rejected and cursed, had found a home. The human, once weak and overlooked, had found his purpose, and the daughter had discovered that love and understanding could triumph over pride and cruelty. And as they stood together, the dragon, the human, and the daughter, the king realized that strength is not in domination, in fear, or in glory, but in patience, in trust, and in the courage to act when hope seems impossible. The human whispered softly to the cub, "We are together, now nothing can take that from us." And the cub lifted its head, eyes glinting with fire and loyalty. The daughter placed her hand on the human's shoulder, and together they looked at the king, and he nodded silently, as if acknowledging a truth he had long ignored, that even in a universe ruled by power and fear, the human heart could achieve the impossible. The story of a dragon cub, an abandoned human, and a daughter trapped by pride had unfolded into a tale of hope, courage, and destiny. And the palace that had once echoed with cruelty now resonated with the quiet, undeniable proof that even the smallest, gentlest hands can shape the course of empires, and that love, trust, and perseverance are mightier than chains, weapons, or thrones. And as the sun rose over the citadel, it shone on a dragon who had found safety, a human who had found purpose, and a daughter who had found the courage to believe in something greater than power. And the universe seemed, for a moment, to pause and honor their bond, and the impossible was no longer impossible. It was reality.